Do you see the potential to talk about this as a cis straight male?
Hold on, you can't assume my gender.
But am I wrong?
Yeah, you're wrong.
Okay, but you're still a cis male. Or
How do you know that though?
Got him!
Because I look like one, right?
no, because
Then why?
You guys absolutely loved the last two parts of this. So I'm going to make another one. Make sure to subscribe, as I am trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. Now let's get straight into this. Here are 2 times when delusional woke people get destroyed instantly, starting with the time when trans activist Frida Wallace clashed with James Whale. She supports trans women that breastfeed infants. Just watch what she has to say. The point I want to make really is this isn't new information. This is just something that's been on the NHS website for a long time, and it's based on empirical evidence. It's not come out of nowhere. They're empirical evidence. That's a really good saying. Yeah, but there's not more trans women breastfeeding. You know how many said about it. That's what I want to bring to the table here, because what's happening is there's a concerted effort to bring stories like this into the media, and it functions basically to frame trans identity, trans people as a problem for society, which we aren't, but the second dangerous thing. But it's your fault that your people like you are making it a problem. No, I'm not making it a problem. Of course you are, because you moan all the time. You sort of get into conversations. You go online. I've seen some of your online criticisms of me. Makes me laugh. I have, to be honest. But you know, you carry on promoting this thing when nobody really cares. It's called free speech, James. No, it's not really, is it? Because you moan like mad about never being invited on the program. No, what? The reason I want to talk about it is because what it does, it diminishes women in the media as well. So it doesn't diminish what you mean trans activists you're admitting now are diminishing women. No, the story is so. What are the main complaints from women is all trans people are always talked about. Trans women are always talking. We're always talking about them. But this story operates like that. It dehumanizes women as well. It needs to be talked about, doesn't it? If the talking about it doesn't need to be talked about at all, if you are going from a transition to one sex to another, you can do it perfectly well. I've got friends who've done it and they live as the opposite sex to the one they will. Absolutely nice. I absolutely agree with that. But I didn't bring the trans issue to the table. Somebody else brought it to the table, and I'm trans. So I'm here to talk about it, yeah. But it might happen. The reason it might happen, though, so that's why it's being talked about. I mean, do you think it should happen if people like you ignored it because I'm not talking to trans activists? There's no way I'm going to ignore organizations like the Policy Exchange pushing things like this into the media. People like Toby Young pushing negative stories about trans people into, there's nobody backing me, nobody's paying me to be here, well, because you're not that important. Well, maybe that's true, James, but I'm here because I care about this subject, and that's the only reason I'm here. But you're saying this milk is fine. You're the fact trans men should do it, know that, is not what I'm arguing. What are you arguing? I'm arguing about why this story is on the table, because it might happen. Might it in the future? Well, lots of things might happen. Well, then we should discuss it before, so we know whether we should let it happen or not. It's like the story you had on previously with Lindsay Smith, that's apocryphal. We know that she was calling trans people sexual predators on Twitter. Is that information on Twitter? Now, we're not talking about, we've already talked about that, so you want to talk about, let me just put this to you. Can I put this to you? Oh, go on, L. And this is the last time I interview you, because you are a pain in the backside, and I had to argue with me, let her go on. I said, I don't want you on the program, my show, and I'll decide who goes on it. Okay, James. And you moan like mad when you've been on it. You probably complain. You complain the whole time when you've been on because I don't agree with anything much. You say, yes, you do. You moan and then get in touch with the producers. I wasn't treating you. Think they should be allowed. Imagine being a grown-up and crying to get on a show. you've been previously destroyed on, these individuals shouldn't be allowed anywhere near babies or small children. I think people should be able to do what the hell they want with their own bodies. It's kind. But the baby doesn't get a choice, does it, the baby? So are you. Implying that trans women are trying to harm babies because if you want to, I don't know if it might harm babies. See you, NHS. It's got drunk, the hormone might get into the baby, you know? I mean, if I can just say what I wanted to say about this, because the reason these they're not coming from nowhere, these stories, they're coming from lobby groups. Listen, they're coming apparently from the NHS, who are saying these drugs, it was always there. It was always there on the NHS website. So what we're really saying is that you actually think that these sort of stories, fine, whatever's going on, they don't need to be in the public eye. No, they don't. I think it put it under the carpet is what you're saying, brush it under the carpet. But I believe it. I believe in free speech, right? So I don't think you understand what free speech is, by the way. No. If I could, I don't believe that Lindsey Smith shouldn't stopped from going football games. I just don't think that should happen. But if you were part of a private members club, Ash and Sunday was, tweeting from the river to the sea in private messages, would you feel what? Would you feel about that? But this is the NHS, isn't it? This is all our service. Forget going back to that. The NHS have said, read it here, they have said they claim drug-induced milk from transgender women who were men is just as good as babies as women's breast milk. Well, it can't be because women chest milk, sorry. Is that what you not call it, breast milk? I'll call it what the bloody hell I want. And the fact is that nobody knows because nobody's been on this milk and brought up. They can never really know. We can't deny that these ideologies are essentially conducting a mass experiment on our children. And that's not just irresponsible, it's dangerous. And the fact is that nobody knows because nobody's been on this milk and brought up. They can never really know, what do you think the substance is that's being produced? I have no idea. From the pituitary ground in the index. Well, you said there was empirical evidence. Where's that from? What evidence is it? The evidence is based on what is observed, but what experiments name the institution? Well, Ash, you know I'm not looked at it in that much detail, but what I would say is, well, why haven't you looked before? You start moaning about you've come on to defend this, to actually say there's nothing wrong with it. I've come on to talk about the fact that trans women are facing a lot of hate online. We've heard it from Brian J's mother that she's trying to campaign to make social media only because these stories do only because trans section of the trans community go on and on and on. That's the only reason I will keep going on and on and on. Well, you're just responsible for it. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye. And here was another wokey trying to defend something she doesn't have proof for. But if you thought this was ridiculous, you should definitely see this next one, because this next heated disagreement between Lizzie Fletcher and Mr. Kenshaw will leave you amazed in this. Clip Kenshaw goes through a study that took place in 2015 based on a survey in 2015. In order to be eligible to participate in that survey, respondents had to identify currently as transgender or gender diverse. So that means that anyone who used to identify that way was automatically excluded. That means people who regret that transition are detransitioners by definition, excluded from the study. And look, it's most of these studies, by the way, are on adults, not children. There's almost no evidence for any of the benefits here on actual children. Most of these studies that are being cited are for adults. None of them are randomized control trials. They don't account for placebo. There's no ability to separate results from other elements of the care routine, such as psychotherapy, correct a couple other myths like just complete lies that were said earlier. This bill does not prevent psychotherapy or the compassionate kind of therapies that are indeed needed for people who have gender dysphoria. We do not deny the existence of gender dysphoria, but we should be following the science here, and the science that our peer country are following, which says that you should not immediately affirm gender and start them on irreversible hormone therapies or puberty blockers, and you say, well, that's not happening. But look, we have quotes from the head of Boston Children saying they're handing out puberty blockers like candy. That's just a direct quote. So we're not fighting some imaginary ghost here. We're fighting something that's really happening. You can't deny it's really happening. Causing the right here. People shouldn't push surgeries and start prioritizing therapies, but Fletcher isn't having it. Let's see how Fletcher fires back against Crenshaw's controversial stance. I think that there's a real problem here because a lot of this discussion is based on a false premise about what is happening. There have been a lot of discussions about surgery and decisions made by children. I think that our colleagues have made clear that these are decisions that are made for anyone under 18 with parents and with physicians. And I think what some of my colleagues have expressed is that it is unusual to hear our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and the reason it feels so out of sync is having them talking about replacing the judgment of parents and doctors, health care providers with the judgment of the federal government, with the judgment of those of us sitting here that don't know any of the specifics of the situation, that don't know any of the particular facts in that matter. And it's the kind of thing that we're used to hearing them say they don't support. And so I think that that's why there's so much confusion here, because you're seeing this response to something that is, as we've heard from our colleagues, as we've heard, I'm not on the subcommittee, but in testimony about the incredible complexity and of these decisions, and I know from personal experience with constituents and friends, the incredibly challenging situation of parents trying to do the right thing for their kids, and we're talking about replacing their judgment with the judgment of the people sitting in this room who, as Miss Craig pointed out, have said they don't know everything about it. So why are we trying to take this decision from physicians and parents who are trying to provide the best possible care with this incredibly blunt instrument that is incredibly punitive and is going to affect the training of future physicians? So I think that, the points that have been made, I won't reiterate all of them, but I do want to respond to one thing that my colleague, Mr. Crenshaw, mentioned, because I wrote it down. It really struck me, and I want to say it deeply offends me that he described what we're talking about now as a social contagion. This is not a contagion. These are our constituents. These are people who live in my district. These are people who live in our shared beloved home state of Texas who are thinking about moving because they don't think it's safe for their families and their children. These are our constituents, all of our constituents. And we should be approaching the conversation about their needs and their rights in a way that is constructive and not referring to our constituents as contagion will the G lady yield. So I can explain that, and I'll give you all the data to support it. I will finish my statement, because I think what is important here is that we are here to protect the rights of our constituent and the freedoms of our constituents. That is exactly what we are talking about doing on this side of the aisle. And it's something I wish that everyone in here would support. We need to support the rights and freedoms of Americans, of all Americans, including transgender kids and their families. And with that, I yield back. Fletcher's stance on surgical interventions for minors is certainly provocative, but wait for Crenshaw's response, because his pointed argument with facts and data backing it, whether this is good or bad, all right. But let's talk about why it's a social contagion. Look, just in the UK, referrals went up by a factor of 33 between 2009 and 2000. In recent years, Reuter documented 56 GLE surgeries in patients between 13 to 17, between 19 and 2021. Alone, none of this was happening before. So what's the difference, and why is there other studies that show that you're far more likely to identify as transgender if your peers do? So to say that it's not socially based, to say that it's not based in what your peers are doing, would be refuting the evidence entirely. That's why I say that. It's not offensive. It's a fact. All of the data supports it. All of the numbers support it. So why do older generation not have these same numbers? Why could it be that because they didn't have access to all the social media and all of that peer pressure in this new trend? Okay, why is it that, years ago we thought that frontal lobotomies were okay, or electroshock therapy was okay? All the scientific consensus thought that was okay too. Sometimes it's just wrong in this case. The scientific consensus already says it's wrong. I want a Democrat colleague to please refute all of these systematic reviews. Tell me why they're wrong. I tell you why each one of your studies that you present is wrong, because I've looked at it before you did. I know him better than you do. So let's have that debate. Let's actually debate the science dependence on medication and the anguish of regret for this reason. More and more European countries and the international professional organizations now recommend psychotherapy rather than hormones and surgery as the first line of treatment for debate points we aren't making. Okay? But the parents are being informed by people who were being misinformed. Like the science is the science, the data is the data K. Shaw's rebuttal hit like a sledgehammer, leaving Fletcher struggling for words. Kaw is one of the intelligent, well-spoken, and respectful politicians, fighting for kids that are too young to understand the importance of considering the long-term effects of these decisions. Subscribe if you watch till the end.